Today, we're diving into a pretty wild idea, that hidden deep inside ancient scriptures are descriptions of scientific truths, discoveries we've only confirmed in the last few hundred years. So could these texts really have been thousands of years ahead of their time? Let's get into it.
And that really is the million-dollar question here, isn't it? Could a collection of writings from millennia ago, way before we had telescopes or microscopes, actually contain nuggets of scientific wisdom that we've only recently figured out? So just so we're all on the same page, in this explainer, we're going to walk through a bunch of sources that make this very bold claim. Our goal isn't to convince you one way or the other, but simply to lay out the arguments and the passages they point to as evidence.
All right, let's jump right in and explore these supposed connections. And we're going to start with the biggest picture possible, the entire universe.
First up, the cosmos. The sources we've been reviewing highlight several passages that, they argue, describe some fundamental truths about astronomy with what they call, well, stunning accuracy.
So this first claim begins with the very first line of the Bible. The argument is simple, that the phrase "in the beginning" lines up perfectly with one of the most important discoveries in modern cosmology, the Big Bang Theory, which proved that our universe actually had a specific, definite starting point.
Okay, next up is the sheer scale of the universe. For pretty much all of human history, you could look up at the night sky and think, yeah, I could probably count all those stars. It seemed like there were maybe just a few thousand of them. But then you get a verse like this one from Psalms. The argument is that while God might know the number, the passage implies that for us humans, the stars are essentially uncountable. And that fits perfectly with what modern astronomy tells us, that there are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone.
Now for a claim that's, well, it's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. How would an ancient writer with no concept of gravity even begin to describe Earth's position in the solar system?
Well, the book of Job, which is considered one of the oldest in the Bible, uses this incredibly simple but powerful phrase, "He hangs the earth upon nothing." Proponents say this is a ridiculously precise description of our planet just floating in the vacuum of space, held only by an invisible force we now call gravity.
Okay, so let's zoom in from the vastness of space right back down to our home planet. The sources also point to descriptions of Earth science and even biology that they claim were centuries ahead of their time.
You know, for a long time, many ancient cultures believed the earth was flat. But sources highlight this verse from Isaiah. The whole argument boils down to the Hebrew word chug, translated as circle. Interpreters argue its meaning is a bit broader, suggesting something rounded or spherical. And of course, from way up in space, a sphere would look like a circle, hinting at the planet's true shape.
What about really complex systems, like the water cycle? I mean, the whole process of evaporation, condensation, and rain wasn't really understood by science until the 16th and 17th centuries. But once again, people point to the book of Job. This passage is presented as a simple, plain language description of the process. Water gets drawn up, it forms mist or clouds, and then it distills back down as rain. It's a remarkably clear picture of the hydrologic cycle.
Moving into biology, this one is pretty striking, especially when you think about medical history. For centuries, doctors practiced bloodletting, thinking it would cure diseases. They totally misunderstood blood's function. And yet, the book of Leviticus makes this foundational statement: the life of the flesh is in the blood, which is, a core principle of modern physiology.
And staying in Leviticus, sources also point to its incredibly detailed laws for isolating people with infectious diseases. These instructions on quarantine and sanitation, they're seen as an early form of public health guidance, basically echoing the principles of germ theory thousands of years before we knew what germs were.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. We're going to move away from the physical sciences and into a more interpretive area, prophecy and history. This is where sources connect scriptural passages to current events and some ancient mysteries.
A very current example is the drying of the Euphrates River. This is a real-world environmental issue that has grabbed a lot of attention because that specific river is mentioned in the Bible, especially in the prophetic book of Revelation. As one of our sources directly states, connecting this event to end times prophecies is considered speculative. So we're not endorsing this interpretation, just reporting on the connection that people are actively making right now.
Two other big mysteries that always come up are the age of the Earth and, of course, dinosaurs. On the Earth's age, some interpretations of the genealogies in the Bible arrive at a figure around 6,000 to 10,000 years, And as for dinosaurs, well, they're not mentioned by name, but some sources speculate that the description of a massive creature called Behemoth in Job could be a reference to a huge sauropod-like animal.
So, after looking at the cosmos, our planet, and even prophecy, what's the main takeaway from all the sources we've explored?
The big argument presented over and over in these sources is not about conflict, but about harmony. The claim is that scripture and science aren't at odds. Instead, one uncovers the how of the physical world, while the other reveals truths about the who and why behind it all.
This quote from one source really captures that whole perspective, the idea that scientific study doesn't take away from faith, but actually makes it stronger, revealing what they call the fingerprints of a designer.
And that leaves us with the final question for you to think about. Are these connections actual evidence of inspired ancient knowledge? Or are they just the product of creative interpretation, fitting modern ideas onto old texts? Or are they all just profound coincidences? We've presented the claims, and the interpretation, well, that's up to you.